This is the Juki HZL-DX5, and it cuts a lot of the tiny frustrations out of sewing. I spend more time guiding fabric and less time hunting for scissors or squinting at a needle. I would describe this as a computerized home sewing machine, built for people who actually sew week in and week out. It fits the sweet spot for an intermediate user or an ambitious beginner who is ready to grow. If you make garments, home decor, and some quilting, and you want smoother control and fewer interruptions, this lands right in that lane. The look is clean and modern with a white body and deep blue lettering, but what matters in daily use is the build. The outer shell feels solid with a mix of sturdy plastic and metal panels. It is compact enough for a home table, yet the arm is longer than what I am used to on basic machines, which gives me real room to work. The weight is around 22 pounds, so it does not feel flimsy. That heft keeps it grounded when I push heavier layers through. There is a hard case in the box, which I appreciate for storage, but I would not call this a travel-friendly machine. The control area is straightforward. A backlit liquid crystal display, firm buttons that do not wobble, a speed slider, and a physical dial for presser foot pressure. The knee lift lever sits right where my leg can find it without looking. The auxiliary bed slides off to reveal a free arm, and there is a small storage compartment inside for feet, needles, and bobbins. Up top, the threading path is clearly marked, and the throat plate has a small lever on the front that flips it from a wide opening to a single straight stitch hole. That lever sounds like a small thing. In practice, it saves time and improves accuracy. Setup felt refreshingly easy. Threading the top path is straightforward, and the automatic needle threader works the way I want it to work. Press and the thread is through. No drama. Winding a bobbin is smooth, and the drop-in bobbin design resists jams. I have not had a snarled nest inside the case yet, even when I changed thread types and forgot to double-check tension on the first test line. The first power on is not intimidating. The backlit liquid crystal display shows the stitch number, the length and width, and your presser foot recommendation. I am used to purely mechanical dials, so I wondered if a screen would slow me down. It did not. I pick a stitch, nudge length or width a hair, and I am sewing. There is a short learning curve to remember where certain stitches live in the menus, but after a couple of sessions it becomes muscle memory. What stands out in actual sewing is the control. The motor has real pace when you need it, topping out around 1,050 stitches per minute, but the more impressive part is how steady it feels at low speed. I can crawl along a top stitch on denim without shutters, then push the slider up and run long interior seams quickly. Vibration is minimal. The feed feels positive without being grabby. Adjusting presser foot pressure is a big help with tricky fabrics. I back it off a bit for knits so they do not ripple, and I tighten it for multiple layers so they do not shift. The machine stays planted, and I do not chase it across the table even when I am wrestling a quilt sandwich. The stitch library is generous without being silly. There are around 185 built-in stitches, including a solid set of utility and stretch options, plus decorative choices and alphabet fonts that are more practical for labels than for show. What matters is the quality of the core stitches. Straight stitches look even. Zigzags look clean. Stretch stitches on jersey do not tunnel when I get the pressure dialed in. Buttonholes finish with balanced sides, and the straight stitch plate lever pays off. When I flip to the single hole and switch to a fine needle, my straight stitches on thin cottons and silks look tighter and more accurate, and I do not worry about a wide opening swallowing the fabric. Smart detail. The machine knows when the single hole plate is engaged, and it will not let me pick a wide stitch that would snap a needle. In real use, those little features that look like footnotes end up being the ones I rely on all day. The knee lift changes everything once you get used to it. I keep both hands holding fabric layers in place, nudge the lever with my knee, pivot, and keep sewing. The automatic thread cutter trims top and bottom threads with a neat snip. I thought I did not need that until I had it. Now I use it constantly to clean up ends before moving to the next seam. The free arm converts quickly when I pull off the extension table, which makes sleeves, cuffs, and small circular pieces so much easier. The work light is bright enough and evenly aimed, so I am not fighting shadows over the needle. I tested it with a few projects that mirror what I actually sew. I hemmed a pair of heavy denim jeans by folding twice at the original hem. With the presser foot pressure turned up a notch and a sharp denim needle, the machine climbed the thick cross seams without stalling. I used the knee lift to ease over the hump, and the stitches stayed consistent. I made a set of linen pillow covers with exposed top stitching and invisible zippers. Guiding long top stitches with the speed slider down low gave me clean lines, and the needle stop up or down control helped me anchor corners accurately. For the zippers, I swapped to the zipper foot and moved the needle position with the buttons until the line sat right beside the teeth. No fuss. I also pieced a small lap quilt top. Switching the throat plate to the single hole and using a 1/4-inch foot, my seams stayed accurate across chain piecing runs. When I needed to pivot at intersecting points, the knee lift kept the alignment true. The machine does free motion quilting, and while the throat space is generous for a domestic machine, it is still not the endless runway you get on a dedicated long arm. I could manage a lap quilt comfortably. A very large quilt would be possible, but I would brace myself for the bulk. I tried fabrics that usually make me sigh. Lightweight rayon pulled less at the start of a seam when I used the single hole plate. Fleece fed evenly when I nudged the pressure up and lengthened the stitch slightly. Cotton jersey did not wave at the edges once I paired a stretch stitch with lighter presser foot pressure and a ballpoint needle. The machine is not fussy, but it does reward a little setup. I also made a run of shirt buttonholes. I put the button in the buttonhole foot, snapped it on, and pressed start. The machine measured and stitched consistent openings down the placket. I was braced for one to come out a hair too big or too small. They matched. For a quick label on the inside, the alphabet fonts did the job. They are basic and not fancy script, but for initials and simple names they are fine. Noise matters in a small home. This is not silent, but it has a smooth hum rather than a clatter. At slower speeds it blends into the background. At full tilt you know it is moving, but the tone stays even. The foot pedal has a predictable curve. I can feather it to creep forward thread by thread, or I can floor it on a long seam. I appreciate that the speed slider caps the maximum, so I do not accidentally sprint past a tricky area. There are a few quirks that I noticed and worked around. The machine is heavy. That is part of why it runs so smoothly, but carrying it upstairs is not fun, even with the case. If you plan to take it to classes every week, your shoulder might complain. The tension adjustment is manual, not automatic. I actually prefer having control, but it does mean you will spend a few minutes with test scraps when you switch from, say, a fine voile to thick canvas. Once you understand where the sweet spot sits for each fabric type, it becomes second nature. The menu navigation on the screen is simple, but it feels a little old school. It is fast enough, and I would rather have reliability than flashy graphics, but it is worth mentioning. The throat space is spacious compared to starter machines. But if you are a dedicated quilter who wrangles king-size quilts every month, you might want even more room. What truly wins me over is how this machine reduces friction in the process. The automatic needle threader removes a tiny but constant annoyance. The thread cutter saves seconds at every seam, and those seconds add up over a project. The knee lift keeps my hands where they need to be. The quick flip to a straight stitch plate gives me accuracy on delicate work without digging out a screwdriver. The jam-resistant drop-in bobbin takes worry off the table. None of these are flashy features on their own. Together, they make sewing feel calmer and more controlled. If you are a beginner who wants the absolute simplest machine with almost no options, this might feel like more than you need on day one. If you are willing to learn, it will meet you where you are and give you room to grow. If you are intermediate or you have outgrown an entry-level model, this feels like a dependable upgrade that will handle garments, home projects, and medium-sized quilts without drama. Stitch quality is even, the motor is confident, and the ergonomics let you focus on your fabric rather than on the tool itself. I am keeping this in my rotation for garments, home decor, and the occasional quilt top. It has the muscle for denim and layered seams, the finesse for light fabrics with the straight stitch plate, and the creature comforts that keep me moving. I like that I do not have to baby it, and I like that it rewards a little attention to setup with excellent results. That sums up my experience after real hours on the Juki HZL-DX5. If you want a reliable workhorse with thoughtful features that matter in daily use, and you do not mind a small learning curve along with a bit of weight, this is an easy machine to recommend. I will leave all the information about the Juki HZL-DX5 in the comments. I hope to see you again in the following videos.